Hello. So we are now into familiar drugs. It's a little hard to understand why alcohol didn't make this section. You may also have noticed that there was a problem with the schedule of events, and chapter, I believe, 9 repeated. So I fixed that. And this is the next chapter. The good news about that fix is that we get to do what I would call opiates, as opposed to what the book and the rest of the world calls opioids. So tobacco. This is how my family often died. It's a product that, when used correctly, according to directions, you still can get sick and die. A friend of mine wrote a book on whether it's addictive. The book clearly seems to believe it is. My friend who wrote the book doesn't, but he does believe it's I think he called it a well-learned habit, and it's very difficult to stop. So we'll just call it addictive. And I remember well the battle with big tobacco, and I also remember the brands that my family members used to smoke until death. Um, and big tobacco was evil, I would say, and it is evil. They are shifting tobacco consumption offshore and killing people there, and sometimes lawyering little countries to death by trying to suppress laws that would protect people in other countries from smoking. They just crush them with legal uh, issues. So this came, we brought Europe brought diseases to the New World and decimated it. The New World had a number of uh, useful products and also tobacco, not very useful. They took a while before tobacco became popular. And I had a few students who chewed tobacco. That's hard to look at, sitting next to a computer with a spit cup. I used to teach a course basically in behavior modification. And each year, students had to pick a behavior that they wanted to modify or improve. And one of my students thought he was chewing tobacco too often, so that's what he submitted as his behavior modification product. But then a few weeks later, he had to come in because he had had a precancerous lesion removed from the inside of his mouth, and he was no longer chewing. Quite the habit. The other thing that I don't think the book talks much about is there's a lot of nicotine on those leaves in that picture. And children historically have been sent out into these fields to work on them. And they can be exposed to uh, high levels of nicotine, which are potentially or literally toxic. And there's there was a big delay between tobacco being discovered and it becoming popular in Europe. There's something sort of related to that in a comedic post I've given you. Um, I don't have much to supplement this chapter with, but Bob Newhart used to do sketches where he would do fake phone calls, and they were very funny. And this is Bob Newhart talking to Sir Walter Raleigh about Sir Walter's relatively new product. Remember, it took a while for tobacco to catch on in Europe. I love his comedic mind, and I forgot that bit also leads us into the next chapter, caffeine. And yeah, once the wealthy got into tobacco, popularity spread, and wait, did I miss something? Yeah, they had hoped that it would have medical uses. Um, Not so much. Tobacco in the movies. You look at older movies, and there's so much smoking. When I first came to Scranton back in the '80s, I would spend summers at UCLA, and one huge difference between Scranton and LA was I'd spend the summer there, and I'd come back here, and I was just shocked at the amount of smoking that went on in Scranton. That's less true today, but it was huge back then. And there's tobacco and there's sexism and there's types of tobacco and the history of being able to grow it. Uh, and it was a big deal. Lots of money and there's snuff and chewing. Oh my God, I can't imagine chewing. And cigars, you eliminate the paper and you roll it up and burn it tobacco in tobacco. Um, I'm binge watching old Columbos on, and I'm struck. I do it largely because of how weirdly they dressed back in the day. But Columbo always had a cigar, and then there's cigarettes and Philip Morris, one of the big tobacco evil, uh, creating a cigarette machine was a big deal in terms of getting uh, tobacco in the hands of the masses. At first, of course, there were no filters. Now we have filters um, and camels. I think my grandfather liked camels for a while. Then he shifted to Chesterfield. And the World War II uh, was very good for big tobacco. They were basically giving away tobacco to soldiers who were stressed and basically had nothing other than to do between fighting but hang out and smoke. And Lucky Strikes, one of my father's favorites, were popular. Pall Mall, yeah, yeah. These are all very. I spent my childhood going to Hanks. By the way, if you look at there's a Biden tour you can do where you can drive to different places, and one of the places you can drive to is Hanks. I used to live less than half a block from there, and I spent many happy days hanging out at Hanks, and I would have to go there. Timmy, go get cigs. Okay, I will go get you cigs, and then you will tragically die. So tobacco under attack, and there's sexism in here. It was also a sign of liberation uh, for women. The women were so frail we couldn't educate them because it would hurt them to think so hard. And smoking was bad. Uh, Smoking by women and even young girls must be considered from a far different standpoint than smoking by men. Oh, geez, and we've seen Reefer Madness, um, and it had a bad rep. 50% of our insanity inherited from parents. uh, who were users of tobacco. Uh, every boy appearing before him and lost the faculty of blushing was a cigarette fiend, which reminds me of marijuana fiends. Um, Cancer by the Carton, 1952. I was alive for that one, but too young to recognize it. If you ever get to go to Cooper's uh, on the way to Greenridge, uh, they have a lot of old ads on the walls in there, some of them promoting the use of tobacco, some of them using movie stars and physicians. And big tobacco really uh, pulled out all the stops to, uh, to increase smoking. Smoking has gone down quite a bit, and we have laws about advertising it both in media and on the packages. Of course, as I said, big tobacco is shifting its product offshore, where some cultures want to grow up to be us, and they see us smoking in old movies, so they want to smoke just like uh, Americans, and safer cigarettes. And now we're getting into the blend. It's quite clear that big tobacco modified cigarettes to put a certain amount of nicotine in there. But they did try to make things safer, reduce tar, having filters. Um, Better than nothing, but not safe. And then there's Chesterfield, my grandfather's brand, and marketing cigarettes just for women, and we menthol cigarettes were marketed to a subset, and we're still dealing with menthol cigarettes, trying to, I think we're working on banning them. E-cigarettes, which are not the same as what you're thinking, but they started off. R.J. Reynolds, with my union, the University of Scranton's union, used to invest in R.J. Reynolds, which became R.J. Reynolds Nabisco. And I remember being at a meeting where I was complaining about our union putting money into R.J. Reynolds, and the union chiefs were saying, "Well, we make a lot of money doing that, so we should do it, right?" Yeah, well, invest in slavery, man. Um, so the e-cigarettes are probably safer. Um, and Eclipse, they don't make it anymore, but they did for a while. And then there's different kinds of tobacco products, and Family Smoking Prevention and Control Act. Um, I wonder if that survived the president before the current one. Hopefully, because it was an effort to reduce smoking. The social cost, the the literal cost, because medical of tobacco uh, is something a society should definitely address. And there's good news. People are smoking less, and you're in college, and that suggests that you are less likely to smoke. Of course, there's a question of correlation and causation. This is a correlational study. We didn't make people go to college, so we don't know if this is causal or if it's just that people who are better at planning for the future tend to go to college, and they also tend to not smoke. And but it pains me so much to see tweens smoking, and smokeless tobaccos, snuff. I don't think I've ever seen anyone use snuff. Uh, It is a little hard to imagine, but apparently, if you're into it, you're really into it. Um, and you don't remember the Marlboro cowboy riding his horse and smoking, and then later dying of cancer. Uh, Rural areas like chewing, because you don't have to worry about the wind. Males take more risks than females. Uh, and this, again, reminds me of my student who had a precancerous growth. I wonder how he ended up. Uh, and vaping is really popular now, and regulation on this is varying, and flavored vapes, and marketing vapes to children. The key with tobacco, big tobacco learned very on, if you don't start smoking early, unless you go to war, you don't smoke. So you have to figure out a way to make smoking cool. Uh, Joe Camel, Camel products were trying to encourage children to smoke. If you can get to be your age or a little bit older, and you haven't started smoking, you're just too smart to do it. Your prefrontal lobes, your ability to foresee the future, to inhibit stupid behaviors, get too strong, and you don't smoke. So under normal circumstances, the big tobacco needs children uh, to smoke hookah. There was a hookah bar in Scranton. I don't know if that is going to survive the lockdown, but it's a very interesting technology. It's very social. Um, might be a little bit safer, but it's a little hard to relate. I, I've I know students who used to go to the hookah bar, and they had fun. They liked it. Where was it? I think Wyoming Avenue. Um, and Yeah, this is a great quote. Despite tobacco industry efforts, it's abundantly clear tobacco is America's true killer weed, and it's also a gateway, quite potentially. And Yeah, it's really good that the Surgeon Generals, uh, became involved in warning us about uh, tobacco. It's And parents smoking. There's a really disturbing picture coming up in this chapter of a pregnant woman smoking. Uh, it is definitely associated with reduced birth rate, increased spontaneous abortion, and some behavioral changes after birth. Smoking bad. Secondhand smoke. Oh, geez. Yeah, there's a picture. So, my house was just a cloud. My mother and my father would smoke constantly, and yeah, uh, and that isn't good. My raspy voice is not because of secondhand smoke. It's because I was a cheerleader, and I blew out my voice. Um, Secondhand smoke is bad. Uh, yeah, I'd go to LA and you couldn't smoke indoors, and you come back to Scranton, and it was choking. People would come to visit, and they could not believe that bars and restaurants still allowed smoking. And again, watching Columbo, he's smoking everywhere. Bill Nye the Science Guy went on a drunken rant about indoor smoking when he visited New York years ago. I just missed him by a couple days when I was in Ithaca. So there's we prefer to call them developing countries, and big tobacco is really pushing that. Here we go. So this is pregnancy, and this has to be one of the most disturbing pictures ever, assuming it's real. Hopefully, it's just stage. Um, Definitely health consequences there. Although, again, correlation causation, we can't assign pregnant women to smoke or not smoke. So we can't do an experiment. We cannot manipulate smoking. All we can do is look at correlations. Just like we can't prove that the moon causes tides on Earth because we can't manipulate the moon, we can't get rid of it. We have to use correlations. And as I love to say, any idiot can do an experiment and interpret it. Correlations, you got to be really smart. And big tobacco went out of its way to increase confusion. And they started research institutes to look into this. And they knew they would never find a causal link between an experimental causal link between tobacco and smoking because it's unethical to do the research. Yeah, spend a few $1 million, big tobacco, on the safety of cigarettes. You'll never, I mean, in animals, for humans, we can demonstrate uh, health consequences of tobacco, no problem. But it's unethical to do that research uh, in people. No reasonable person would still try to deny this. So nicotine is a simple molecule. It mentions DNL forms. This may be the first time it comes up in the book. Uh, don't worry about it. That is interesting, though. In my world of opiates, DNL is a very big deal, and it makes a huge difference whether or not the drug works. Not for nicotine. So it's a very simple molecule, carbons and nitrogens and absorption. Based on how you administer it, you can tell it can be absorbed through several routes. One of my students was viciously addicted to nicotine, and AMH, during her lifespan, outlawed smoking in the building. And sometimes I would walk outside with her under the canopy in front of AMH while when she was, just in desperate need of a hit. And you could just see the relief of her first real drag of nicotine. Cigarette butts can contain enough nicotine to harm children, and they're kind of salty, meaning I like them. Um, we make insecticides by taking tobacco and soaking it in warm water and extracting nicotine and then putting it on insects, and it kills them. The liver is important here, of course, and the kidneys are important. And how does it work? Well, nicotine, there's one acetylcholine receptor called the nicotinic receptor. If it's called the nicotinic receptor, that suggests there are others which are not nicotinic. You move your muscles, uh, your voluntary muscles with nicotinic receptors. And if you got sufficient dose of nicotine, which again can sometimes happen to children, your muscles will spasm. They will all contract, and including those muscles involved in something kind of important like breathing, and it can kill you. Um, Not good. And certainly nobody smokes tobacco to have respiratory arrest and death. The lethal dose of nicotine is quite a bit higher than the dose necessary to affect your central nervous system. And also, you see it affects your peripheral nervous system and adrenaline, and it does a lot of things. Low level nicotine. This is why I don't smoke. First time I tried to smoke because I was a male and I was stupid and I was in high school and my parents were all smoking. Oh my God, nausea and dizziness. And that was it for me. I was saved from a lifetime of smoking because it literally made me sick. I wish that for all people who consider beginning uh, to smoke. And there's a little thing on EEG and the things that it can do, uh, and eating, and people who I know who have tried to kick smoking. There is a tendency to eat more. My mom tried all sorts of things. I really wanted to try her nicotine gum because there are research that nicotine can help with focused attention, and I really wanted to see what that was like. But mom would not give me any nicotine gum, and she did patches, she did everything, uh, to no avail. She smoked until the very end. The My friend who wrote the book on nicotine would not agree that nicotine is the only reinforcing substance in tobacco. He was a believer in fire. Of course, that doesn't explain chewing. And he questioned some of this monkey research in terms of how willing monkeys were to self administer, but the book says it, so you have to believe it's true. My friend was not a friend, a fan of that, but it's certainly, even if split hairs on the definition of what addicting is, whatever it is, once you start doing it, you have a lot of trouble stopping. So children are very important, and people are very good at titrating their intake of uh, tobacco to get a fairly stable nicotine content in the blood. And it is definitely dependence inducing. Uh, and the here's data on nicotine dependence and Surgeon General. And my friend was not, who wrote the book, was not a fan of one of the Surgeon Generals. I forget which one. Uh, but still, I think the Surgeon General did something very good by bringing to light the health consequences of smoking. And yeah, there's Philip Morris, part of Big Tobacco, and they suppressed the research because it would hurt industry and help people, and that was evil. It is evil. Big sugar does some of this stuff uh, too, and there are heritable differences. First smoking experience, again with me, it was great. Nausea and vomiting. And there's nicotinic receptors. Uh, they uh, they There are drugs that derive from these. They may or may not help with Alzheimer's, cognitive decline. There's some pain control issues and ADHD. Boy, I remember going. I was in a class when I was you, and I had to, go to meetings about things. And I went to an AA meeting, which was held on campus. It wasn't a campus event, but they allowed AA to use the room. And smoking indoors was legal when I was you. And I could not believe the amount of smoking that was going on at the AA meeting. There was definitely an association there. I could barely breathe. And different ways of stopping smoking. Oh boy, emphysema. One of the faculty I had in grad school died of emphysema. You don't want to do that. That was an ugly, ugly way to go. And if you care about your face, smoker's face there. People try to stop smoking, and it's really, really difficult. Uh, it's so there's nicotine, and there's nicotine patches. One of my students took bupropion. I don't think it helps, but it didn't cure. Uh, and there's a partial agonist, so it's not as aggressive as nicotine. And we haven't figured this out. Uh, and of course, I'm going to promote cognitive behavioral therapy, and counseling with pharmacological treatments seems to work well. And whenever I see counseling, I don't think of counseling, I think of cognitive behavioral therapy. And there we are at the end of the chapter. So it's an easy to dance to chapter. I don't think you'll have any trouble with it. Enjoy. And next we get to do caffeine. I have 4 shots of espresso every morning. Um, that's basically my drug of choice right now. So, and thus ends nicotine.